Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Charity Charge Show. This is Grayson Harris, and today we are pleased to be joined by Robert Lewis Jr. He is both the CEO and president of the Boys and Girls Club of Boston. Robert, thank you for joining us today.
Grayson, thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
So am I. I'm really excited to really dive in. I would love if you could just set the stage and tell, myself and our audience a little bit more about the work that you're doing out there in Boston.
Thank you. One, we're just very excited about our work in the community of Boston and one of the neighborhoods that abuts us, a neighborhood called Chelsea, Massachusetts. What we're focused on, we have 9 clubs throughout Boston and Chelsea. Where we're just serving in terms of young folks, families, and members, close to 40,000 people, that are surrounding our communities. I'd say in a very simple way, our whole idea of how are we providing the resources, the support, and the tools for our young folks to be successful. We're serving young folks from the age of 6 to the age of 18. And we want to ensure that all of our young folks have the experiences. So when they leave our Boys and Girls Club, they are prepared with a plan. If it is to go on to college in higher ed, if it's to really think about if it's the trades, or if they're just, it's some and not totally sure, but that we're providing opportunities. And we do a lot of that work through our work around 3 key pillars: academic and education, really focused on reading, writing, and spelling. We're also looking at health and wellness, about the mental, emotional, physical well-being of our folks, while ensuring we're providing healthy food and healthy meals for our young folks and families. And then the next big part is how are we providing access and opportunities of skills and learning to get our young folks ready for this 21st century economy, because they are our region's next talent pipeline and workforce. So that's it in a simple form. And we have 9 incredible buildings where a lot of great work can happen.
Wow.
And we are the trusted youth development organization in Boston and Chelsea.
I love that. And, you mentioned these three pillars. I would love, again, if you could explain a little bit about the needs that you are seeing in each of these pillars for your community.
Yeah, it's fun. We're looking to focus on and how we came to these needs. A few years ago, we started off and we wanted to do a strategic plan. So we did a survey with our staff. We did a survey, with partners and vendors, as well as to parents. And we took all this feedback and information. We did a couple of town hall meetings, Grayson, where we went out and we talked to parents about this. And what we were finding from the parents and from our staff, but even with some of the local data was showing, was that in particular, young folks, and in particular, young urban kids, weren't doing well in math and in writing and, and spelling. And what we realized that we needed to do is have much more of a focus, even though we are not a school. But we have to make sure we're supporting our young folks with those tools and skills and literacy and
Mm,
so many other factors for us, to be able to address. And a big part of our work too is how are we closing these gaps? The academic gap, the achievement gap, the wealth gap, the health gap. And what we're doing now is work with some incredible thought partners that are experts in the industry that are supporting our work happening in our clubs. The thing around health is a big one, and we all know since COVID, mental health has been a tsunami for young folks, urban, suburban, rural. It does not matter.
yeah.
White, black, it just doesn't matter. What we realize is that because we have access to our young folks every day, how do we ensure we're making the investment? All of our clubs has a social worker, and it's important that we have a social worker that's able and available to help meet some of the social needs that our young folks have. But how do we do it in a way where our social workers are seen as the fabric of the staff and not that all of a sudden, it's almost like you're going to a hospital or you're going to a health center. But we want them to know that that support is there. And we want to make sure that we're partnering with major health and industries and entities in our surrounding community. And one of the fortunate things we have in Boston, we're recognized as having some of the greatest hospitals and health institutions in the world. And
Yeah.
how are we leveraging that? And one of the CEO of the Children's Hospital, which has been recognized as the number 1 or 2 children's hospital in America, sits on our board. So how are we leveraging that
Mm.
and ensuring every single day that our young folks get a healthy snack and a healthy meal, right? To ensure that our young folks, because if a young folks aren't eating healthy, how are you expected to do well in school or do well after school and others? So those are like key factors to us with so many things happening around social media, body shaming, all of those things. We
Mm,
need to take care of the emotional well-being of our folks. And then in the last entity is that listen, we happen to be in a great region, right? In a great region that's looking for talent. The way we see it is, you know, one of the things in Boston, the business community, we have a lot of folks that come from around the country and around the world to come to Boston to go to college. And then our business community is hoping to retain folks that they stay here for the economy and for
yeah.
workforce. We have thousands of kids in Boston, thousands of kids that are our members. We want to invest in them right now. So at a very young age, we have, like our Ready to Work Academy, where our preteens are really learning certain skills, getting access because we want to get them ready and getting that mindset ready for
Right.
them to start thinking about, hey, I can work in a club, I can do community service, all of those things that are factors. And then as you get older, we have our Ready to Work University. And that university is really providing, again, it's real life work experience in our clubs, visiting companies or institutions to find out just around industries, because
Mm,
unfortunately, at times, all the young folks don't know all the opportunities that exist. And it's our role to ensure we do that. And then what I love is that we provide opportunities for folks to be employed
mm,
in internships, in jobs, at the clubs, outside the clubs, in businesses, in companies. Because again, if we want our young folks to succeed and we want our communities to succeed, we have to invest in their skills and their talent and getting them prepared. Overarching, even though we said that three different pillars, it's one holistic approach of ensuring that the young folks have all of the tools and the resources for them to, succeed. When every person leaves at 18, we want them to say, yes, they had a great experience. But the biggest thing, like I said at the beginning, and then what's their next step, right?
mm.
So even that's what our members, but we're on a whole recruitment surge right now. We want any and every young person in Boston and in Chelsea that if they feel they want to succeed and do well, we want them to consider the Boys and Girls Clubs is the place that will do all the preparation and everything they need to be successful young folks, but to be active citizens in the future.
Incredible. I really was excited to set the stage in terms of the needs that you're seeing both in Boston and Chelsea, right? And you also mentioned the fact that you want every single youth in the area to really get involved. And whenever you stepped in, starting in September, there's this new program, really making it cost free. And correct me if I'm wrong, for
Yes.
any youth to come and get involved within your programs. I would love if you could tell me a little bit more about that idea and why you viewed that as a necessary component of the programs.
you know, there's a lot going on, and this was a great opportunity with my colleagues here. Also, we've been doing some work and helping to start a parent advisory group as well. There's so much that's going on, Grayson, in our country, and so
Mm,
much that's going on in our local community. We needed to figure out how did we do something that would support families and our members, and some of that was how do we release the financial burden that families did not have to think, am I going to spend these dollars on a membership or do I need to do food? Am I going to spend these dollars on a membership or I need to make sure I have money to take a Uber or a taxi or transportation to get to an appointment?
mm,
By doing this, it's a very simple thing. Release the financial burden, right? Which still means the burden is still on us as an organization because we still have to raise the money to offset that. So I want just to be clear, it wasn't a donor that started off that said you should do this. It was like the organization. And what I'm hoping is that there will be donors out there that are going to say, hey, great move. We support this. But we're also on a campaign this year to bring in another 2,000 members. So we're going to have to raise the money to offset that because we don't want that burden to be on parents. And if I want to say it in the simplest reason why we did this, Grayson, because it was the right thing to do.
mm.
And we're going to continue to look at opportunities that if it can release the financial burden on our members and our families. But here's the only thing I want folks to also realize. it could sound like it's free. The membership is free, but they still young folks have to put in the sweat equity to be successful. They still have to show up. They have to participate in our programs and everything. So there's a sweat equity that they
Yeah.
have because people can get confused and say, "Oh, it's free." It is not free. The membership is free, but the commitment is going to be that's the cost that you pay to be engaged. And to be honest, my colleagues here, I got to give them credit. When they were saying, "Hey, Robert, we should announce this, go public on your LinkedIn," I don't know if I want to do that. And since I've been here 3.5 years, that decision has gotten more notoriety, more hits than anything. And we have seen it in the increase of our membership, at least over these last few months. And I believe that has something to do with it. But it's the right thing. I think during the time and even now, as we're thinking about, federal subsidies potentially
Mm.
being cut and reduced, what else are we going to need to do? Because parents are waking up every day and trying to figure out, holy crap, in this world of uncertainty, what am I going to need to do to ensure my young folks are successful, ensuring I'm capable of doing the things I need to do? And I want to make sure at the end of the day, can I also put food on the table for my kids to be able to have? And that's going to be one of the next things we're going to be looking at. It's great to say we provide close to 280,000 meals a year to our members. But if these federal subsidies get cut and reduced, what does that mean for our young folks when they're
Mm.
not at the club? What does that mean for their families during evenings and weekends? We can't allow food inequities in these cuts to have an impact on our young folks and their family and our broader community. So there'll be more to come. We're going to start talking about this next week. But I just feel as a leader in youth development, as a leader in this city, as a convener in this city, we will step up. And if we step up in a big way, maybe others in the youth development sector, business sector will rise with us.
Well, that was a perfect segue into kind of the next question I was really excited to dive into, right? And a big key component that's allowed you to, offer reduce the barriers, for the members of the community to take advantage of the services that y'all have are these collaboration within Boston with both, the government, other nonprofit organizations, and corporations across the city as well. Can you tell me a little bit more about what your philosophy and strategy in terms of building a community to support the youth of Boston looks like, and how you get buy-in from all aspects of Boston?
Yeah, I think it's a great thing. We have an incredible board and an incredible trustee. And these are incredible business and civic leaders who care and who have a history, within their companies or within our city of Boston of being engaged. So I think one of the biggest things is when I was saying earlier, when we were doing our strategic plan, we engaged them in the process. And they were part of the working groups and the working committees. And a big part for us is to ensure that they feel like they are part of helping and supporting and addressing the issues. We do that in a few different ways. Besides the fundraising, besides the corporate engagement of their employees, we ask them to come out and experience the club. Come and spend a day and see our young folks, meet our young folks, walk around, see the power and the role we have in communities. And then on some ends, they'll have great ideas and or they want to step up and support us. We've had a couple of companies that have stepped up and they're doing like technology, Tech Tuesdays in a few of our clubs, ensuring our young folks have the tools and the skills to do things. We have other companies that actually host our young folks during the summer, for like I said, jobs and internships. A lot of our companies do that as well. One thing that I have seen in this city and one thing that I've seen with our organization is our power of activating the private sector community through our board and others. How are we activating the public sector, colleges, universities, and others? And how are we activating the citizenship and those our parents and others to be involved? When you bring this group collectively together, I always say Boston can't be stopped. And we are a model of heavy engagement, support. How are we can continue to keep them informed and educated? And, let's be real. It's about relationship, not transaction, right? This is about investing, not just supporting. They're investing in the future of Boston, the
Mm.
future of our region, the future of our country. And part of their investment is potentially in their next pipeline. So we've been blessed to have an incredible board, have incredible corporate supporters and investors. And the great thing about that is this is where we are now, but we're still at a moment that we still have to do a little bit more. So a lot of our work is how do we engage some that we haven't really engaged
Mm,
over the years? How do we engage some that have been, and do we take it to the next level? Because the needs really outrank the amount of money that we can raise. The needs are that much. So it is critically important for
yeah.
us. And we haven't really relied on government funding, but what we've relied on is government partnerships with our city and state representatives as well.
Thank you for that answer. And for our nonprofit audience that's listening in there and they're looking to enact some of these changes within their local communities as well. What would be, an action or a piece of advice that you would give them as they look to incorporate some of the successes that you've had?
If the one thing I would say to nonprofit leaders, look at the data of your region. Look at it. The data's telling you the story. I think the hardest thing is, you almost have to step up and be a little bolder. We got to be bold. We have to be clear. Are we doing our work to run organizations? Or are we actually leading change? There's a lot of folks who are running organizations. I'm about change management and change and impact. It is about putting yourself out there. I'd also say to folks, surround yourself with staff that really care deeply, train and invest in them because it's all this work is on the ground. It's with those staff that are doing this community work. And to the best of your ability, how are you also engaging thought partners? Don't feel like your institution has to do it all by yourself. Use your ecosystem of community and civic leaders and others to help you to achieve this. But I guess if I could say this, and I want to say it in the most respectful way in the world to our sector, because we're a huge sector in our country. As we're moving forward today, it's going to take bold and civic leadership to
Mm.
really address these issues. And listen, I'm your partner in this work as I would need you as partners in this work as well. So again, being bold, invest in your team, be clear through data what are the real issues that you need to be taking on and go at it. The other thing too is if we all had the answers, we'd all be copying each other. The unfortunate part, a lot of this is a new time, and things change every 5 or 10 or 15 years. And we have to be ready for those changes, which means our institutions, our staff, and what maybe some of our goals and purposes are.
Thank you for that answer. And the pillar that I'd love to dive into a little bit more is this team aspect. I think it's one of the parts that, has allowed you and your organization to be so adaptable. And a big part of the reason we're having this conversation today is the incredible team behind you. So I would love if you could tell me a little bit more about the strategy that goes into, building and retaining a team and talent within an organization and really being, stewarding that talent as well.
Listen, it's every day is still a work in progress, right? We're doing our work and we still have a long way to go. I think a few things for us when I first came in, and this was like my predecessor, but I was glad I had a chance to do this. A few things you have to do. You have to look, and we had to look at our compensation of our staff, right? And you have to make sure you're competitive. And you
Mm,
want to do that, and it's salary because that is important. People's time matters. But you also want to ensure that folks feel like they're part of change and they're part of decision making and others. And again, we have a way to go with that, and we're still working on that. But what I feel is at least we're clear on what our purpose are, the goals and objectives we want to meet. We're looking to make a major investment in our human resources and people development. And that's key and critical. Like you can't ask staff to do the work and you don't provide them with the training. And if there's one thing I've learned for our field staff, we can't think they're the experts in academic and workforce and health and wellness. That's unfair. And unfortunately, in our sector, we get too many workers that have to do it all. What we realize is that our workers and colleagues are great coaches, phenomenal mentors, and they're trusted advisors. And how do we leverage that in terms of our impact with our young folks? And then, as I said earlier, how do we partner with thought leaders and experts? I'd say the other thing that is critically important, and I start my meetings next week with all of our staff. Just go and listen. Just go and listen to the staff. as last night we finished our series of Thursday night meetings with our juniors and seniors at our clubs to hear from them as well. You have to listen to folks and you have to believe in something that sometimes is hard to remember is if they have ideas and thoughts, let them go. And I really mean that. Like they have ideas and thoughts, and I say that for my colleagues that set up the podcast and others. My job is to follow their lead and not for me to tell them what I think they need to do and others. And that's a culture that I want to create because we actually want our young folks as they're leveraging their opportunity in the club, but when they leave the club to be citizens, we want them as active participants. And if we're not doing that now or investing in them now to do that, how are they going to know what to do when they leave our club? So your staff is the foundation of everything. And I'd say after the staff, the second thing we don't think about, but how do we make sure that our buildings, that we're making that investment in our buildings, in
Mm,
our facilities, because we want to make sure that nothing happens where we have to close up, right? So our buildings, as well as our staff, are two important entities. Our human resources and others, we're looking to make big investments, in ensuring training and development. And not just for our staff, to be honest, my selfishness, Grayson, is I want us to help define when we think about training in our youth development sector, that there's a level of consistency at the clubs, but any youth development sector in terms of language. Because if you bring 50 organizations today and say, which youth development, you'll get probably 50 different answers. I want to help us play a role to figure out how do we help professionalize the field and do
mm.
our training. And then once we get there with our staff, is this something we can offer up to other youth development organizations in our city as well?
That's incredible, and I love, you have built along with your team this incredible culture and this change making culture for a CEO, an executive director that's looking at their organization and they're looking to take that first step towards it. Maybe think back to 4 years ago whenever you stepped into this role. What would you say as well as a small piece of advice there that they could?
I think the greatest thing for me is like within my first 6 to 9 months, I was just out talking to the staff, but also, let's be real, like doing observation too. Sometimes observing culture, how we do things, also observing parents that are coming into the building and things of that nature. Like, are they welcomed in the building?
Mm,
Others. And, then you start really talking to, and the great thing I feel blessed and fortunate is I live in the same city that our clubs are. So it's also great to be in community meetings and hearing the perspective or perceptions of what people have of our clubs or the knowledge sharings. I got to be honest, so much of what you're talking about, our marketing communications team has done a lot of great work because a lot of folks may have thought we were a drop-in center or like,
mm,
we did this and we did that and not realize for us, I feel like we're like this talent development pipeline and there's
yeah.
so many other resources we provided, or that here's our strategy moving forward. So we wanted to shift the language and the narrative, and we did that by listening and being out, our messaging, the idea that I'm on this podcast to really help tell our stories and elevating the stories of what we needed to do. So again, I would say my guidance would be for anybody get out there and listen, not just to your staff and those you serve, but the constituents in
Mm,
the area as well, because there's so much knowledge it'll share. And then how do you take one or two things that you're able and you're capable of implementing? It is all about your staff and it is all about culture. We all know the reason why people leave companies sometimes is their supervisors or their culture. So the best you can do is ensure that your colleagues have the tools and the skills they need. And how do you create a culture that hopefully is going to inspire and excite people that they're going to want to wake up every day because it's all about the work and it's all about that
mm.
impact that we're looking to make.
Well, speaking of that impact, what does the future bring for your organization? There's these conversations happening next week around a potential food insecurity within your community. What else are you looking towards? Adding 2,000 new, youth with the programs as well. What does the future bring?
What excites me is we're starting to engage in a conversation. We have our executive board next week, and we're going to take 45 minutes and talk about the future. One, we're going to know things. We know academics are going to be clear. We know mental health, that's going to be a tsunami for the next 10, 15 years. So we know
Mm,
all of those things. I think for me, the biggest thing is I want to look at where are pockets of this city that we may not be serving young people and how do we get to serve them? But I want us to think differently about that. So if we have so much development going on, housing development,
mm,
business development in our city, and as a part of these business deals, a lot of these companies have to do community benefits. And what a lot of them have done in housing and others, they have built 5,000 square foot community space. So all of these great housing units in Boston have all this community space, but Grayson, what they don't have is programming. So I don't want to worry about that I have to do capital investment, but how are we ensuring that
mm,
we're reaching out in communities that we're not serving? How do we think about a service model that's different? How do we think about during the summer, besides service that we provide inside? Now, this isn't new. This is going back to something the club did years ago, but it could be newer to staff today. I remember back in the day when the clubs used to run programs at parks and playgrounds. Why not go back to doing some
mm,
of those things and serving where the young folks are? So, we're going to be putting out some street teams. So I want to engage more young folks. I think what I want to do is as we're moving forward is our staff are professionalized and certified in youth development in
mm,
industries, right? And that we become a training ground on a local and national level. I'm hoping that the public housing developments see us as a model that we could be in every public housing development in the city. So a part of that is going to be our work and our impact, how we're telling the story, but how are we responding to major community needs? The last thing is, why do we have to equip our young folks with skills today? Because we have to get them ready for the next 5, 7, 8 years of these jobs that we have no idea what they're going to be, but we have to get ready for that. And some of that has to be how are we taking AI and like the knowledge of AI,
mm,
and how are we understanding the positive aspects of AI? Because AI is going to be so much a part of our future. So, what we can't be, and this happened in urban America years ago. When technology was taken off, inner cities in America were so far behind. So when they were catching up, technology was already in another level. I
mm,
want us to be in it and not to ever feel like we're having to catch up, but that we again could partner with experts in the industries and fields. And if there was one thing that I will hope that will happen over the years is that we're gonna figure out a way that a lot of this, and we're doing a job of this, and it's fortunate for the kids that are in our clubs. But how are we breaking down all this social isolation and all of this mental health and part of social media that is having a negative impact on our young folks? How can we maybe play a role in flipping? How does that have a positive impact, like on our community? So it's not what we're doing today, but I just think there's an opportunity in the future for us to be thinking more about being responsive to
mm.
critical needs as we're moving forward.
Thank you for sharing that. And how can our community get more involved with your organization?
I think the biggest thing, I mean, there's a couple of things that I believe that I'm going to say to the organization, but I'm going to really stay on involvement. We can send a person to the moon and back, but we don't cross the street to say hello to our neighbors. I think there almost has to be this thing of citizenship and
Mm,
civics and humanity. And what I mean by that is people just need to engage more with people. People need to be better citizens of their neighborhoods. And we want you to be a partner with us. But for me in a big way, and I believe this, sometimes how do you support and help our young folks if you're not doing it on your own block or your own neighborhoods? And sometimes I say, hey, tell me the name of 3 or 4 kids that live on your street.
mm,
Get to know them as well. So, and then what I think we can really figure out, get to know those young folks, and then be our, referral source. Refer them to our clubs or refer families to our clubs. So I think this whole idea of citizenship and how are we as citizens more actively engaged collectively
mm,
together. Our work, yes, as an institution is to do so many things. But when we leave our work, we are citizens of our neighborhoods, citizens of our communities. And what I want to do is hopefully, as I said earlier, as our young folks leave us, we're creating some of Boston and Chelsea's most active citizens, most active leaders, really most active advocates moving forward. when we are able to look back in years to come and look at that, then we've known we've done a lot of tremendous work. The unfortunate part, people want you to evaluate your success at the age of 18 and 19. Sometimes you can't evaluate your success until they're 22, 25, or 30. But
Mm.
that's the big thing with our alumni. The more we can stay engaged, staying involved in knowing how they're doing in the near future and future years to come.
Incredible. Robert, thank you so much for coming on and sharing more about the impact that y'all are having and really driving that impact through the needs and speaking to the members of your community and sharing all of that with our audience today.
Grayson, listen, I thank you for having us, and me join you and to share what we're doing here at the Boys and Girls Clubs of Boston. I would say to folks that are watching, check out your Boys and Girls Clubs around the country. You'll just see a lot of great work that's happening as part of this great movement.
Thank you very much.
Be well.